What's up? I'm Melody Chronicles, and let's go. Under the heavy veil of a Los Angeles night, the city's pulse seemed to falter between moments of fleeting neon brilliance and deep, unsettling shadows. In an alleyway lit only by the sporadic flicker of malfunctioning street lamps, Kendrick Lamar walked with measured steps. Known to the world as a poet of rhythm and rhyme, tonight he was merely a man caught in the crosshairs of fate, a fate that had led him into an entanglement far removed from his usual realm of soulful verses and the echoing applause of adoring fans. The night had begun innocently enough. Earlier, at a private gathering behind the glimmering facade of a downtown club, Kendrick had been approached by a stranger with an offer that danced dangerously on the edges of legality. Promises of a substantial payout and the allure of an adrenaline rush had clouded his judgment. In a moment of reckless vulnerability, he had accepted a small, sleek firearm, a token that was meant to serve as protection in a world that had suddenly become uncertain. The decision, made in the heat of the moment, was as impulsive as it was uncharacteristic, driven by a need to reclaim a sense of control in a life increasingly dominated by the pressures of fame and expectations. Within hours, that decision began to spiral into a complex web of consequences. As Kendrick navigated his way through a labyrinth of dimly lit backstreets and abandoned warehouses, the weight of the contraband pressed not just physically but mentally on his conscience. Each step was a reminder of the fragile line between survival and downfall. The city, notorious for its dichotomy of glamour and grit, had silently set the stage for a confrontation that would test the very core of his identity. Unbeknownst to Kendrick, an ominous ripple was spreading among his inner circle. Malik, a longtime friend and confidant, had sensed that something was off. Malik was a man who had witnessed Kendrick's rise from humble beginnings, sharing in the triumphs and missteps along the way. Yet, that evening, a gnawing fear and a sense of foreboding had led him to question the motives of those newly drawn into Kendrick's orbit. Malik's mind raced with doubts about the intentions behind this late-night escapade, and soon, the shadow of betrayal began to form in his heart. As the cool night air mingled with the distant hum of sirens, Malik found himself at a crossroads. In a private, tear-stained moment of internal conflict, he wrestled with loyalty and the responsibility he felt towards the community that had once uplifted them both. His mind, clouded by a blend of duty and desperation, made a fateful decision. Overwhelmed by the fear of what Kendrick's dangerous entanglement might unleash upon them all, Malik resolved to do what he believed was necessary for the greater good, even if it meant betraying the man he had once considered a brother. Meanwhile, Kendrick's own inner turmoil escalated with every beat of his heart. He recalled the lyrics he had once penned about struggle and redemption, yet now those very words seemed to haunt him with a bitter irony. The sound of distant sirens grew louder as a creeping dread filled his thoughts. He had always been a man of conviction, yet tonight he felt like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by unseen forces. Every dark corner of the city whispered secrets, each one amplifying his isolation and fear. In a quiet, desolate warehouse on the fringes of the city, Kendrick sought refuge, a temporary hideaway from the chaos he had inadvertently set in motion. The building, with its crumbling walls and broken windows, provided little comfort. The stark reality of his situation began to crystallize. The decisions, made in a moment of reckless abandon, were now catching up with him. Shadows danced around him as he attempted to reconcile the persona the world adored with the human frailty he now felt so deeply. His thoughts churned like the relentless ocean tide, a mix of regret, defiance, and a desperate yearning for redemption. As midnight passed, the inevitable collision of destiny loomed ever closer. In the distance, the wail of sirens became a relentless symphony, harmonizing with the rapid beats of Kendrick's anxious heart. Little did he know that Malik's decision had already set events into irreversible motion. The betrayal, a bitter twist of fate, would soon force Kendrick to confront not only the consequences of his choices but also the raw truth of his vulnerability. In that moment of impending crisis, as the weight of betrayal and the promise of retribution began to coalesce, Kendrick's world teetered on the brink. The stage was set for a dramatic encounter, a collision of loyalties, secrets, and the unyielding force of destiny. With the echo of sirens growing louder and Malik's decision casting a long shadow over the night, The path ahead promised nothing but uncertainty and heartache. The oppressive hum of police radios mingled with the distant rumble of engines as dawn threatened to break the long, painful night. Outside the dilapidated warehouse, blue and red lights painted the cracked pavement in harsh, unyielding hues. Inside, time seemed to have stretched into an endless corridor of regret and reflection. Every passing minute deepened the gravity of Kendrick's predicament, a predicament born not only of one impulsive choice but also of a betrayal by someone he once trusted implicitly. When the heavy oak door finally burst open, the intrusion was both physical and emotional. Officers in tactical gear stormed the building with a precision that left no room for error. "Kendrick, it's over," one of them announced, his tone laced with a resigned finality that cut deeper than any accusation. With trembling hands, Kendrick slowly raised them in surrender. He felt each heartbeat echoing the words of his past verses, a tragic reminder that even the most eloquent souls could falter when faced with their own demons. Transported to a stark, fluorescent-lit holding cell, Kendrick was left alone with the cacophony of his thoughts. The cold, unyielding walls of the cell mirrored the isolation he now felt. Here, every sound, a distant shout, the clank of a metal door, even the subtle murmur of the ventilation system, became an unwelcome metronome for the countdown of his uncertain future. In that moment, the full weight of Malik's betrayal crashed upon him. The friend who had once shared his dreams had chosen duty over loyalty, setting in motion a chain of events that left Kendrick grappling with loss, anger, and overwhelming remorse. Hours later, in the sterile confines of an interrogation room, two detectives faced Kendrick with relentless questions. "Who gave you the gun?" one demanded, his voice a blend of professional detachment and a personal disappointment that resonated in the silence following the query. Kendrick's gaze fell to the table as he wrestled with his own conscience. "It was a mistake," he began, his tone subdued and heavy with regret. "A choice made when I was desperate to feel something. Control, maybe, or just a semblance of power in a world that had grown too unpredictable." The confession was not just an admission of guilt. It was an anguished recognition of the complexity of human frailty. In the midst of the interrogation, memories of Malik surfaced with painful clarity. Malik's conflicted face, shadowed by doubt and sorrow, replayed in Kendrick's mind like a looping film reel. Malik had been more than a friend. He had been a silent guardian during the turbulent years leading up to Kendrick's rise to fame. Yet, on that fateful night, fear and the burden of responsibility had driven him to make an excruciating choice, a choice that now echoed as a haunting lament in every corner of Kendrick's psyche. Outside the interrogation room, news of the arrest spread like wildfire. The media, ever hungry for scandal, seized upon the story. A renowned artist embroiled in a criminal mishap spiked with betrayal. Headlines splashed across screens and paper, painting Kendrick in a light that oscillated wildly between tragic hero and cautionary tale. Fans and critics alike debated the veracity of every detail, while the court of public opinion rendered judgments far more severe than any legal tribunal ever could. As the day wore on, Kendrick was presented with a stark dilemma: accept a plea deal that would mitigate his punishment in exchange for cooperation, or maintain a semblance of defiance that risked a more devastating sentence. The offer, as cold and calculated as it was, symbolized the ultimate crossroads between redemption and downfall. In the solitude of his cell, amidst the echoes of his own internal strife, Kendrick began to write in his mind a series of verses that spoke not of glorified triumphs but of raw, unfiltered confession. His lyrics, once a source of inspiration for millions, now became a private litany of regret and a tentative roadmap toward atonement. Late into the early hours, as the relentless hum of the station lulled into an uneasy quiet, Kendrick was visited by a seasoned officer whose voice bore the weariness of many such encounters. "You know, sometimes our greatest mistakes teach us the lessons we most desperately need," the officer remarked softly, almost as if offering a lifeline in a sea of despair. The words, simple yet profound, stirred something within Kendrick, a glimmer of hope that perhaps this moment of reckoning could be the beginning of an arduous journey towards self-forgiveness. Even as the city outside began its daily stir, indifferent to the inner turmoil of one man's downfall, Kendrick made a silent vow. He would not let this betrayal, this singular act of weakness, define his legacy. Instead, he would use it as a crucible, a painful, transformative process that might one day allow him to emerge not unscathed but wiser, tempered by the harsh lessons of trust and consequence. Every regret, every moment of self-doubt, would be channeled into his art, creating a tapestry of redemption that spoke to the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. In that precarious balance between despair and hope, as the pale light of dawn began to seep into his cell, Kendrick realized that the true measure of a man was not in the perfection of his choices but in his ability to rise after falling. With each whispered promise to himself, he embraced the inevitable cost of his past actions, a cost that, while steep, might yet pave the way for a future where the melody of his life could be rewritten. As the day unfolded, the echoes of betrayal and the stirrings of personal revolution coexisted within him. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with legal battles, public scrutiny, and the relentless shadow of his former self. But in that crucible of judgment, Kendrick discovered a stubborn ember of resolve, a determination to transform his misfortune into an enduring narrative of redemption, hope, and the endless capacity for reinvention.